Welcome to this week's episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. Today we're diving into an essential oil that I've loved for for a long, long time, I should say, but some people may not have heard of it. So I'm glad you jumped in to join us today because we want to show you about all the benefits and the virtues of an essential oil known as Davana. Joining me today, as usual, is Elizabeth Ashley. How are you today, Liz?
I'm very well, but this is all very last minute because we got the wrong day and everything was going a bit wrong. And it does feel like a kind of a Davana shift. So that's quite interesting. I'm looking forward to exploring and hearing what you have to say, because usually when something like that happens, it's because we need to hear something.
So this is an interesting oil, probably that not many people do have in their collection. Found in places such as India. It's a little green plant with little yellow flowers, but it's from the leaves that we get this essential oil. Now, probably the most fascinating thing I've found about this essential oil is not so much its physical therapeutic benefits, but in its fragrance. You see, what we've found is when different people pop it on their skin and wear it as a natural perfume, it will blend and dance with your unique chemistry to bring out a unique scent. So some people, after a few minutes, they'll smell their wrist or where they put it, and it will smell rather floral. Others, it will smell quite green. Some get a woody aroma, or even an earthy wood aroma. Sorry, an earthy aroma. And I popped it on about 10 minutes ago, and to me, it's somewhere near an earthy and green aroma for me. But some people, it smells like not like roses, but a real kind of floral aroma, which I find absolutely fascinating.
So I'll add to that. I would have said that it was floral fruity on me. And what was quite amusing actually that you've opened with that. I was very lucky to receive Debbie Atterbury's new book about sustainability of Australian oils for natural perfumery yesterday. And I opened a book, like flicking through. It's very pretty. I never, obviously, I haven't got it in front of me because I didn't know we were going to say this. But on page 43, she's written a thing that said, "Did you know that perfumes change on people's skin and smell different on people's skin based on how much oil they have in their skin?" So I
Mm.
didn't know that. I sent her a message going, "Does this explain why all perfumes smell like cat pee on me?" Yes, they do. But I have to say, Davana does smell really lovely, and it has a really sort of deep, rich, uh, orangey smell, verging on kind of geranium on me. So yeah, it is strange how it's different on everybody.
Yeah, really unique. Now, when it comes to its physical benefits, I guess where I would kind of recommend it for use, it can be used in just general skincare. It's got some attributes for helping a bit with, regulating the menstrual cycle, some aches and pains and digestion and a bit of respiratory. But really, I think it's in its perfume, and maybe as we dive into its spiritual aspects, that's where it really does sing. Because I think with all the attributes I've just mentioned, I'm not going to reach for Davana. I'd reach for something else. What about you? How would you use this for physical healing and well-being?
So my answer to that is I'm with you. I don't really use it for physical stuff, but in Ayurvedic medicine, it's well used for obesity, for wait a minute, I wrote everything down, for asthma and colds. Interestingly, it's what they use if somebody has measles, which I thought was shows how strong a medicine it is. But the main reason that it is explored, and there is quite a lot of science, high blood pressure. And so, but that would not be the essential oil. That would be a tea that they make from it. And what's
Mm.
interesting is we've talked about that it is a plant, but what you didn't mention is it's an Artemisia plant. And Artemisias tend to be quite uh, almost like aggressive medicines, really. Um, so you've got things like so tarragon, for example, is Artemisia drumunculaus. I can't say it. And then there's we talked about Artemisia annua with Felicity. Try to speak again, Francis Bartlett a few months ago. But Artemisia vulgaris is the one that everybody's a little bit frightened of. But it is because it has these almost uh, I don't want to say sort of hallucinogenic aspects, because that's not what it is, but it has a real sense of shift about it, and it can distort your thinking. Artemisias distort your thinking. So, for example, and that doesn't necessarily need to be in a bad way. So, for example, the way that tarragon distorts your thinking is it makes you think differently about appetite. So it's a really good medicine for somebody who, for example, is having cancer treatment and doesn't want to eat. They've got no appetite. It plays on the mental attitudes to make them think, actually, I do think I can eat. So they all have these kind of transformational shifts to them. Interesting, for example, that you would use it in Ayurveda for asthma, where asthma often has a real stress component to it, that, you know, if you're worried that you're going to have an asthma attack, you almost certainly are going to have an asthma attack. And it has that soothing aspect. And also, of course, obesity has that sort of mental aspect of having to change your mindset about food. Again, another Artemisia quality. So, yeah, I wouldn't use it for physical stuff for the same reason as you, really. I can always think of something else that would be easier and that I know better, except for the fact that it does have this unusual capacity to blend with other oils. And so if I wanted to make a specifically, there's definite benefits to making a blend where people can't identify what the fragrance is in it, because that has medicine in its own right, that they're not engaging with it and going, oh, I can smell it's lavender. They're straight away, they're going to a story about lavender in their head when you're massaging them. So being able to make a blend sometimes where if somebody is very in their head and you want them to kind of get right out of it, making a blend that they can't engage with it intellectually is useful. And Davana is good for that, because it is very like has like a mercurial quicksilver ability, that it hides and shifts and changes. And in Hinduism, it's the devotional offering that you would give to Shiva, who is the god of transformation. And daily Davana is put onto as like an altar offering every single day, because it's seen as the manifestation of Shiva, the god of contemplation but of transformation.
And talking about Shiva as well, you know, there are the three of Brahma, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And Shiva is the destroyer. So I think we can even take that a little bit further in the way that this is a really great oil that when we're getting stuck on how something should be and not accepting change, I think Davana is really great at allowing us to kind of let go of, anything that's not serving us anymore, and feel, that it doesn't, things cannot always remain the same. And I think Davana, as it evolves even on our skin in the first 5, 10, 15 minutes, it also shows us that everything must evolve in life and to feel okay and less anxious about that.
Yeah, I agree, and I mean that in itself is an intellectual thing, isn't it? When you refuse to let go of something, because you can always find a reason to hold on to it or an excuse to hold on to it, and you internally rationalize your internal script. You know what I mean? You keep coming back and giving reasons why that script is working when patently it's not often.
Yeah.
And I'll go to a place that I was going to go later, really. Usually, when we talk about what planet rules it, we would say a planet. I would say that this has the energy of an eclipse. How an eclipse comes into our life and goes, yes, well, that's done, and you're not doing something with it, so I am. And that feels like that energy of Davana to me. Chemically, it's a very strange one. When you look at the chemistry, there's almost no chemicals in it that you would be able to say, oh, I know what that one does. You know, we can usually go, oh, 1-8-cineol does this, citral does that, linol does that. You know, you can, there's like things that you can hang your knowledge on. But when you go through the chemistry, you can see there's like 10% nerol, so that's, like neroli. So there's your orange, probably what I can smell, that fruitiness. But most of them begin with DAV. So clearly they're constituents that people have gone, I found it somewhere else, and it's like a one I found in Davana. So these are really quite unique oils, innovative oils, if constituents, if you like. They don't really exist anywhere else. So for example, you've got Davanone makes like 38% of it usually in the constituents. Divinic acid, which really made me think of like the priests of David, the Solomon's priests and stuff, this divinic kind of code. But as you go through, you can go, I've never seen that before, I've never seen that before, I've never seen that before. And that is quite an Artemis quality, really, that she is the goddess of the wilderness. She's off on her own. You see that quite a lot in Artemisia plants.
Very much so. Do you think that the fact that there is so much, like you said, there's constituents in there that we don't really know well, that this could potentially be an essential oil that has more potential, just more research is required to kind of find out what all these different things like Davanic acid do?
Well, maybe, but I think that, what do I think? I think that Ayurvedic medicine's been using the plant for a really long time. And so it's well explored from that context. Whether all of the constituents pass through distillation, I don't know. I don't see it being one that will has the capacity to transform the world, and therefore probably why would you spend the money on those kinds of experiments? There's unless they could prove that it cured measles, because then that would be universe changing, wouldn't it? But for the most part, no, I don't think that we'll ever see that much experimentation with it.
Mm. So there's a really interesting dance, isn't there, between like the Eastern where it's native to and that connection to Shiva, but then with its Latin name, that reference to Artemis. Now, for those that are familiar with Artemis, forgive this very blunt kind of description of this amazing Greek and then also Roman goddess. She was a child of Zeus's, who, as she was growing up, she could see all the chaos that was happening and all the love and the trials and tribulations. And so she decided one day, sitting on her father's lap, Daddy, can I have a wish? And Zeus is like, you can have whatever you want. She's like, I don't ever want a partner. I just want to go live in the forest with my girl pals and be the goddess of the hunt and the animals and the moon and all these different things. And pretty much all her mythology is about occasionally men came into contact with her and she was not interested at all. So she really danced to the beat of her own drum. And I think if people aren't familiar with the goddess Artemis, there are many people probably that also resonate with the material we produce that are very Artemis in their approach to life, even if they are in a relationship. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. So I think that we should clarify that it wasn't that she said she didn't want a partner; she wanted to remain a virgin, and I think that's really important that we say that. But also, the girl pals that you talked about are usually nymphs,
Hmm.
and I think that is an interesting way to look at Artemis plants, that they seem to be able to move you to a different realm, to be able to interact with different realms. And I do think that Davana has this really quite almost like Midsummer Night Dream energy, that it's not only just mystical, but it's magical and pretty and romantic, and it's to me, I don't perceive any darkness in it at all. I think it's a really sort of almost like a Scheherazade character, that it's able to just bewitch you with its stories as you go. Whenever you smell it, it's going to smell a little bit different. So rich in sesquiterpenes, so you have this sense of just being drawn down into your body slowly, 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 really deeply relaxing. So yeah, we should say that Artemis was not worshipped under that name by Romans. She was called Diana, and Diana is the goddess of witches. And so, if she's nothing else, a witch is a woman who is able to transform. And we're back to Shiva energy again.
Yeah, I love that connection, definitely. So one of the reasons I love Davana and where I love to work with it on that holistic level as well is if we look at this fact that we get a different fragrance, we're all individual fragrances when we roll it on. We look at Artemis who danced to the beat of her own drum. She didn't want to follow that normal kind of route that many people have. She wanted to remain a virgin. This is an amazing essential oil for really helping to empower the individual to walk their own path. And, comparisons, whether it be, teenagers growing up and feeling low self esteem. In fact, actually, as I say that about teenagers, I think we never get to the point where we stop comparing ourselves to other people. And I think this is a really beautiful one that can help us to feel comfortable to do what we want to do and live our life in our individual way and to celebrate our own uniqueness because we are all unique. I remember when I filmed my solo video in nature, I talked about the environment I was sitting in. And I said, if I just had one type of tree behind me, it would be rather bland. But in nature, we see all different types of plants, all different types of trees, different animals, and they all play a different role. And humanity is exactly the same, where we each have our own unique role. Beyond that, not only does it allow us to celebrate our uniqueness and feel comfortable with that, and that to be a source of empowerment rather than a source of shame, for example, I think it's also a really great one for embracing other people's diversity as well and realizing that not everyone is the same as us. So I love it for that real acceptance of diversity within ourselves and with everyone around us as well.
Just thinking about what you said about Artemis and there not being that many myths outside of her being in the wilderness has been inaccurate.
Oh,
In
I wasn't
fact,
saying that so much. It's more so much the yeah, there wasn't love
no,
one sort of thing. Yeah, go on.
that's right. But she I'd said that the oil doesn't have a dark side, and I stand by that. I don't feel a dark side by it at all. Artemis definitely does have a dark side, in that for people who don't know, she is born of the goddess Leto, and Leto was cursed by Hera not to be able to give birth when she was pregnant on land. And so she has this awful birth story where she can't find anywhere to give birth. Eventually she does give birth to Artemis, who then helps her to birth her twin, who is Apollo. And these twins are vengeful. They are really vengeful together. And so there's many stories where Artemis and Apollo have really gone after people, especially over this whole birth story of people not allowing her to go near the land because they're frightened of Hera. And they shoot them down. And it's like, don't even bother having a conversation with me. This is what I do. I take my arch. She's known as the arch, the archer goddess, and to take my bow is what I'm trying to say, and shoot them down. And whilst I don't feel that component in this oil, because as I say, it feels really benevolent to me, but it does have that sense of, you did that to me, don't care, moving on. You're dead to me. Dead to me. I'm not going to be distracted by that. I'm just going to carry on, and also I think that in everyday life, quite often we can be affected in our journey of growth and change by what we think other people, how they think other people perceive us. And you can have I'll say I can have hundreds and hundreds of compliments. And then one person said, I don't like that, or I didn't like the way you did that. That's all I'll hear. And this is a good way to use Davana, to just go, it's gone, erase it. And that sabotaging voice, or if somebody is oblivious to the fact that everybody has their own path and your path has nothing to do with them, Divine is very good at being able to shift you out of that component. But also the way that you said about assimilating other qualities. We're talking about the standard personification of Diana, Artemis, because of course it's Artemisia plant. But there is another one who is Artemis of Ephesus. And she, if people don't know her, is a very strange looking goddess. Sometimes she's seen as being black. She's what's called polymastoid. So she's covered in these like lumps all over her. Maybe they're breasts, maybe they're gourds, maybe they're it's been suggested that they're little beehives. But she's called Mistress of the Beast, and she's covered all over she stands with lions, and she's got all sorts of things all over her. And when you study Artemis of Ephesus, who I have because she really was a bee goddess, what you find is before her time, she has assimilated the qualities of the previous goddesses who were there. So at Ephesus, Cybele or Cybele, however you want to say it, was the goddess, and she usurped not only her sanctuary but all of her attributes. She takes on many other goddess attributes, Ishtar in Nana, which is why you start to see her as goddess of the beasts. And then eventually, if you read the Bible, she turns up in the Acts of the Apostles. But St. Paul goes to Ephesus and he gets very angry with the silversmiths who are making a huge living out of making little silver figurines of her. And what you see is the church starts to settle at Ephesus and become a really important sanctuary. Then around about the 4th century, you see the Council of Nicaea, where they're deciding what will be in the New Testament. And one of the things that's important in the New Testament is, well, how do we choose texts that portray Mary? Who is Mary? What does she define? And what are we going to say to the people of the future about Mary? And it's there that she becomes defined as Theotokos, which is Mother of God. But what you see is she really almost gets laid over Artemis of Ephesus, and she takes on many of her qualities. And so what you have all the way through here is this goddess who just is like a sponge for these other qualities. And that's almost exactly what you were describing as you feel as the energy that you assimilate the things around the people around you.
So before you mentioned about seeing it has a very eclipse type of energy, I love working with asteroids in astrology. They help to give us more pinpointed approaches to understanding our psychological makeup. There is actually a asteroid by the name of Artemis. It's number 105. You can look it up and find out where it was in your birth chart, and that can be quite insightful. And what I find really interesting, in fact, is both the asteroids Apollo and Artemis are very, very close to my sun. So I have a strong connection. It's interesting. Normally, prominent asteroids in your chart often come up and are prominent archetypes that you resonate with in your life as well. So that was quite insightful. But whenever I want to call upon that Artemis-like energy for my astrology or in whatever working I'm doing, Davana is the essential oil I reach for.
That's really interesting. So Artemis is the moon. That I think even though it is. I haven't got it growing, but when I've looked at pictures of it, it has a similar kind of look to it as my Artemisia vulgaris by Wormwood, and that shines under the sunshine, under the moonlight. It has this silvery leaves that when they're almost luminescent under the moon, and potentially that's how it got named as an Artemisia, I would have thought. But so when you think about Artemis as the moon, she's actually an aspect of the moon. So Selene is the goddess of the moon, but there are several goddesses who have associations with the moon, like Hecate, for instance, in Greece. But Artemis is first quarter of the moon. And interesting, I was born on first quarter moon, so this a kind of fascination with Artemis to me is quite interesting. I'd be interested to see where Artemis is in my birth chart as the asteroid. But but first quarter, when you're doing sort of thinking about moon rituals, we talk a lot about new moon, we talk about a lot about full moon, but we don't really talk about the quarters. New moon is about initiations of new projects, putting that energy into thinking about what do I want to achieve over this period. Full moon is when it comes to fruition. But the biggest power of movement, almost if you imagine it as the seed comes through the ground, is first quarter. And so Artemis rules that almost like battle surge of like you have just thought that you're going to do it, you are going to set your mind to it, and you are properly driving hard at it. Whereas obviously the waning of the moon is like, I'm quite over this now. The editing of the book. Like, I really like the idea of this book now. Now I don't care if I never read it again. That's the waning of the moon. But yeah, so that's quite interesting when you relate it back to again to how the Indians say that it's a transformation. Shiva is about that contemplation, almost like a new moon, thinking about it, but everything happens within his internal world. And yeah, so like I say, in that healing, it's very good. I mentioned earlier about how when you might choose it for somebody who can't get out of their head and you don't want them to be able to start thinking. When you construct an aromatherapy treatment, ideally you'll construct an arc over around about 6 weeks. And that's good from a treatment point of view, but it's also good from a business point of view, from the therapist, that they can say, right, I've got 6 weeks worth of income. But the client wouldn't be getting a very good service if all you were doing was giving them the same treatment every single week. And so you would assess quite well in their first week what that client was like. Take a really good case history, so you write down a lot, but also you're watching them, and it's very easy to see those people that can't get out of their head. So maybe in week 2 and 3, because by 4 you're at like full moon, you should be able to see really good results and starting to for them to start thinking about, right, I feel like I can do this on my own. So treatments 2 and 3 are very good places to put Davana, because it's Artemis first quarter moon energy.
So one of the conversations we always like to have, do you think people need to have this oil in their collection?
I think it's an extraordinary oil for people who are going to be treating clients. And I mean, from that point of view, it's really good. I always used to find it very helpful as a reason to explain to somebody why we're going to be doing 6 treatments, why we're looking at that arc. And that's a good anchor to use, that we're actually using that certain oils have different energies to certain parts in the process. I also think if it's somebody who really wants to be working on themselves on a spiritual path, so if they're a priestess or a priest, or if they are into witchcraft, or if they're a devotee of Artemis, of course you should have all of them. Like I surround myself with Artemis oils. But your everyday person that's just like, can I buy an oil that just does a lot of things? It does do a lot of things, but not that many useful things for everyday first aid, I don't think.
Yeah, agreed. So we've spoken about astrology. Chakra-wise, where would you place it on the chakra system?
We talked about how it got very mercurial aspect and sort of plays with the thoughts. So I would say third eye, but also for me, energetically, I feel it in solar plexus. Any more than that, I can't really give any rational explanation as to why, except to use it for obesity and stuff. But that's where I can feel it working.
Yeah. For me, this is one of the 3 oils I work with the higher heart chakra. Of course, the heart chakra is to do with our relationship between, how an individual feels. Is there enough give and take in each relationship? Whereas the higher heart chakra is more that realm of how do we feel about humanity overall and whether we are accepting and tolerant and forgiving or whether we are critical and detached and so on. And I find this is a really great one for appreciating your role in the community, but also appreciating that everyone is an ant and an elephant and a palm tree and a armadillo doing their best in the world and kind of embracing that difference and not trying to cookie cutter people, and really good for control freaks or people who think, why isn't everyone just like me? To kind of accept and understand and open that understanding of other people. So I really like it on the upper chest. You're going to get the beautiful fragrance of it there, but it's also going to work with your higher heart chakra, also known as your thymus chakra.
I like that. And I do think that as we've been talking about it, perhaps it feels obvious to me, but maybe it doesn't feel obvious to other people. So when I was talking about assimilating the qualities and being able to say enough already, it's almost like pride and that LGBTQI kind of energy of like, well, you're not like me, I'm not like you, but I am going to live my life anyway.
Yeah.
So I guess so perhaps if somebody, you were talking about teenagers, actually, obviously it doesn't just apply to teenagers, but it's a rife kind of malaise, I suppose, of teenage years of trying to come to terms with who you are, and perhaps you're not the same as your families. So yeah, I would be quite useful, I think, for people like that. We haven't talked about safety. We don't actually need to talk about safety. It's very easy oil to use. There aren't really any contraindications. Around 3% dilution would be fine. Obviously, you wouldn't want to use it in the first 16 weeks of pregnancy. You wouldn't want to use any oils in the first 16 weeks of pregnancy. But outside of that, just you can just use it as you want it, really.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we've intrigued you enough to want to see at least what Davana smells like on your skin. So give it a shot and let's make a start of a collection down below in the comment section. When you pop it on your skin and leave it about 10 minutes, what do you smell? And you'll be fascinated by the amount of diversity you get in what people can smell when it's on themselves. So that's Davana. We'll be back next week. And I think, Liz, we need to look at some more of these Artemisia plants in the coming weeks as well. So maybe next week,
Well,
maybe in a few weeks.
that is something I planned for the school, actually. So you might not win that battle, but yes, you're quite right. I will say to people, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and to thank all those people who did last week, because I saw my numbers go up a lot after we prompted you. So thank you, and we will see you next week.
We'll see you then. Until then, take care and blessed be.